Ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, welcome to Wrocław. My name is Beata and I'm a licensed city guide in Wrocław. I realize that our possibilities of outdoors activities are still pretty limited, but that's the reason, behalf of the City Promotion and Tourism Office and myself, I'd like to take you for a virtual walk through Wrocław. Wrocław is a very specific place of a very specific history. I realize that you may hear it almost everywhere you go, but I truly believe that without next 30 minutes I am able to convince you that Wrocław has something which deserves to bring you in here. And what arguments I'd like to use? I'd like to talk to you about Wrocław's multicultural heritage. Why multicultural heritage? Because the city is somehow unique, not only on Polish, but also on European scale. It's the city which belonged in modern era to the great Moravian country. Then from 10th century till the middle of the 14th century, it was one of the largest city of Kingdom of Poland. Then for 200 years it belongs to Czech. For a while it belonged to Hungary. Then for 200 years it belonged to Austria. And then for 200 years to Prussia and Germany. That means that about Wrocław, a Polish city, we can speak only since the end of World War II, which according to the words used at that time, Wrocław re-became Polish again. But politics and the borders are not the only reason for this multicultural aspect. There is one more, going even much deeper in the history. That's the trade you must have already heard during the previous tour on the main square. Wrocław grew on the tradition of trade. Two most important antique and medieval trade road used to cross right in here. And what was initiated by the merchants in the deep, deep past became the reason for the development of the city and its permanent progress and prosperity till the Industrial Revolution, in fact. And as a consequence, not only were so ethnically varied groups of people living here, but additionally there were people who are coming purely because of business, for the purpose of the trade. The trade used to focus on the main square of Wrocław, but not only. Here we have arrived to a small adjacent square called Salt Square. That means that salt must have been traded here. And it was, but not only. You could have bought also fur, you could have bought honey, so a lot of varied products were at your disposal. And though the reality has already a little bit changed, one thing hasn't. That means the presence of the business. As you can see all around of us, there are a lot of small stalls with flowers. We have a permanent flower market in here. Permanent because it lasts all over the clock, 7 days a week, regardless the season, regardless the weather. You can always have a fresh flower. Pretty romantic, isn't it? And the symbol of the trade being omnipresent here throughout the centuries is, for example, the old Stock Exchange, impressive 19th century building. At the time, the seat of Gilda. Now, a lot of companies and firms are located in here. But though trade was something very important in our history, it's not the only thing we should discuss in here, as the square became the arena of other events. In 1453, Giovanni da Capistrano arrives in Wrocław. He's a Franciscan, general inquisitor, and he starts to preach. He was a man of a real charisma. Though he was speaking in Latin, that means his words must have been interpreted into German and Czech. He managed to take all the people with him. he really broke down the house. And as a result, in euphoria, people came right to the square where they placed their goods, a symbol of their wealth, like wonderful fabrics, like mirrors, chessboards, etc. And they burned them. Unfortunately, the words of Giovanni da Capistrano were very often also addressed against the Jews. And as a result, a Jewish local community was accused of a sacrilege. There was a trial, and in consequence, exactly on this square, 41 members of Jewish community were burned alive. The whole community was exoded from the city, and the children below 7 were taken from those families away, baptized and given to the Catholic Christian families of Wrocław. And what you can see now in the square, in the center, is the statue, which was, we call it Little Spire, is the statue which was placed in 1996, created by Polish artists living permanently in Australia, who decided to commemorate these events in the form of this single flame. Wrocław's multicultural heritage, that means a lot of aspects. That's the linguistic variety of the people. That's cultural variety of the people. That also religious differences. And that's something we are going to discuss, as we truly believe that through the centuries, Wrocław became a real melting pot, which was even mentioned by the future President of the United States of America, John Quincy Adams, who wrote about this multicultural aspect of the city in his diaries while traveling through Silesia. Wrocław is now a place very open to the culture. Though I told you about the past and the heritage of trade, now we have to talk about a completely different aspect of it. It might be quite difficult to imagine in the city we walk through being almost completely deserted. But normally, at day, at night, equally, this city is bustling with life. In numerous cafeterias, bars and restaurants, cinemas, theaters, concert clubs, and so on, the life continues. It's a very young city, full of life and full of energy. Now, looking at its emptiness, it's probably hard to believe. But believe me, once you decide to come, you will see it with your own eyes. Multicultural activity of Wrocław reaches varied levels. In 2016, Wrocław was European Capital of Culture and also World Capital of the Book. This year we carry the title of the City of UNESCO Book. And we are going to see in a moment an object which is connected strongly with this artistic value of the city. Modern architecture, the biggest to Poland, art cinemas center. New horizons. As you can see, there is also the inscription 2016 referring us to European Capital of Culture. In the 9 rooms, you can see a lot of films coming from different corners of the world. They also run a lot of fantastic festivals, and even on the main square in the summertime, you can see a gigantic screen displayed in the middle, on which you can see, of course, subtitled in English, a lot of films coming from Iraq, Chile, Argentina, or Africa. So there is a big possibility to learn a little bit about the culture of other continents as well. And in terms of culture, we have to deal with the aspect I have already mentioned a little bit. That means religious variety. Wrocław has never ever been a homogeneous city at this level. In fact, when Luther presented his thesis of the Reformation inside of the religion, his idea were very fast picked up in this city. And now Wrocław, though in Poland, though in a city with a lot of churches, we possess something absolutely exceptional for all the Poles. It's a district of 4 religions. At a small distance of just few steps from one to the other, you have 4 temples referring us to 4 different religions. There is an Orthodox Church, there is a synagogue, but there is also a Roman Catholic and a Protestant one. And that's been already a lot of years. They've been running together a project of the education, of the differences inside of different religions, of the similarities, of how to be tolerant and open to other ways of perceiving God, which is also, I think, perfectly symbolized by this younger woman also carrying a mask nowadays. She's called Crystal Planet, with her skirt in a perfect shape of the globe and then continents design on it. I think no further comments are necessary. We won't visit the whole district of 4 temples, but we will just walk a little bit through it, so you could, even in front of your cameras, feel a little bit its atmosphere. And it's a very nice place, not only in terms of the religion, as it's a very popular corner where people love to hang out. There are a lot of tiny yards, passages, with a lot of restaurants, cafeterias, where you can have a breakfast, lunch, dinner. In fact, you can spend the whole day in here. And we will only walk through a very small fragment of this district, Jewish district. As it is for the city of trade, Jewish community has almost always been present in the history of Wrocław. After the pogrom I have already mentioned, there was a break of 200 years. But then, especially in the 19th century, we can witness an unbelievable revival. Next to Berlin and Königsberg, and it's important to mention that in 19th century, Wrocław wasn't even called Wrocław, it was called Breslau, because it was a German city. Reformated ideas of Judaism from here spread all around. Here there was a seminar of so high popularity that it was perceived at the time as one of the best in Europe. Wrocław's local Jewish community provided to the world a lot of fantastic people. Just to give a couple of examples, Leopold Auerbach, the discoverer of a fragment of nervous system, which, by the way, was named after him. Then Ferdinand Lassalle, the initiator of social democracy in Germany. From other field of activity, we have Fritz Haber, who got Nobel Prize for synthesis of ammonia, or we have the grandfather of Olivia Newton-Jones, Max Born, who got Nobel Prize in quantum mechanics. Even contemporary patroness of Europe, Edith Stein, was born in a Jewish family, functioning inside of the community of the city of Breslau. And slowly we have arrived to the center of this Jewish district. Look at this yet empty yard. Normally it's full of people, as there are lovely cafeterias, bar, music clubs, and also the dominant element, the synagogue, White Stork Synagogue. Impressive, though in the history, not the biggest synagogue in our city. But about it we will talk a little bit later on. White Stork Synagogue plays a very important role. In here, a lot of festivals important for Judaism are organized, but also it's a great venue for ethno and klezmer music concerts. Sometimes the Jewish community shows us a little bit their tradition, their habits, and which is connected with the most important festivals. So that's the yard when you can where you can enjoy it. So that's a little bit about the square, tiny square, where you can also hang out in a completely different atmosphere, as I mentioned, than in the main square. 1945, the end of World War II. It's the moment which was probably the most difficult for the entire history of the city of Wrocław. First of all, we have a siege and a serious bombing in which almost 70% of the city is destroyed. But then, at the end of the siege, when the war ends, local people learn that some decisions had already been made. According to the decision of the Free in Yalta, this land won't be German anymore. Stalin takes almost 40% of pre-war Polish land on the east. And as it was lovely presented at the propaganda at that time for us, ancient Polish land returned to its original owner. So as it was said, Poland reclaimed its land. And Wrocław starts to be Polish city. What's the consequence? Very important. That means as we change the borders, population needs to be changed as well. So there is a forced transfer of the population. Poles who are chased away from their homelands, and Germans who also have to leave the territory and see the place for new inhabitants. Polish community. It wasn't an easy thing. A lot of them, though they were forced to come here, still believed that their story is not over. They will be able to return. So at the beginning of all this restoration after World War II, a lot of Poles who had just come here thought they would be able to return to their homeland pretty soon. The transfer of people. It is estimated that from the east to the new Western Polish territories, about 1.5 million or even up to 2 million people were transferred. That's a lot. And in the moment, we will see a space which shows again this match of old and new, of different cultures, of people who lived here before the war and those who live here now. But on our way there, I'd like to draw your attention to a little bit of architecture, because we have beautiful architecture all around of us. On your left-hand side, you can see one of the youngest children of Wrocław's architecture. It's a National Forum of Music. Great center for concerts. And what can I say? Discuss technical solutions used here to please your ears with the music? Maybe, but I think it's not the most important. Important thing is that though this building is already 5 years old, still it offers one of the newest and the best technologies to listen to classical music in entire Europe. So to check whether you would enjoy the music of National Forum of Music, you have to come to Wrocław and try us out. We are passing by a little bit of old architecture as well. For example, former Reich Bank, now a hotel. And in front of us, you will see just in a split of seconds, an open space. An open space of the square, which is called Liberty Square now, but its original name was Exercise Square. Why this duality? Let's come to the square and see it from a bit closer. I mentioned the transfer of the population. Wrocław becomes Polish city, and that time propaganda did everything they could to convince the people that they returned to the land of the ancestors. And that's the place they are supposed to live and bring the benefit for the next generations. A common slogan was, "Here even stones speak Polish." Very often that meant that a lot of German inscriptions were removed from the walls or hidden to show that no one else but Poles had already been in this area. Exercise square. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, only after 1989, after first half-free still elections, we start to learn that some elements of the history which were carefully omitted weren't omitted because nothing was happening in Silesia, but that's because this land wasn't Polish. And we have, like, step by step, our history reclaimed. That means we discover that through a lot of centuries, when Poland wasn't present here, a lot of great things happened, and we should be proud of them, though they weren't maybe created by the Poles. And one of the symbols of this past glory is the Royal Palace. Royal Palace was, let's say, organized in the city of Wrocław in 1742. In 1741, William the Great, famous Prussian king, wins the war, and since then on, Wrocław is a Prussian city. And because the king definitely wanted to raise the value of the city in his kingdom, he decided to create here third official residential capital city. So next to Berlin and Königsberg, Breslau, at that time, was officially presidential capital of Prussia. Royal Palace functioned in mentality of first generation of post-war first generations only as the seat of a city museum. But after 1989, we started to bring its original value. Now inside you can see not only historical exhibition of the city, but also you can see the chambers of the king restored and everything what was important for the Prussian nation and Poles living here in the time of Breslau. In one of the former wings of the royal castle there, you can see the Museum of Theatre, another cultural object. Wrocław in the middle of the 20th century became a very important city at the level of culture at different levels. The names like Grotowski, master and reformator of theatre, like Tomaszewski, revolution in pantomime, these were names which said a lot to people of that time. And this Museum of Theatre is now entirely devoted to one of them, exactly Tomaszewski. And at the entrance to the museum you can see a statue, rather a head, let's say even not a bust. It's Orpheus. And already with Orpheus there is a story connected which shows how we can unite two elements of two completely different realities. The plaster cast of Orpheus was created by Theodor von Gosen, a Bavarian artist who worked for a lot of years, in fact till his death, to the city of Breslau. He had the idea of creating Orpheus during World War II. So though he managed to make a plaster cast, he never managed to create the full sculpture. And believe it or not, but 70 years later, this plaster cast was discovered, was found by the director of Wrocław's museum, and he decided to put in life the project that before war artists prepared. And that's why you can see Orpheus. Orpheus, without his Eurydice, doesn't look good. That means she's not here and she won't be here, just on the contrary. But to see her and learn her story, we'd like to invite you to come to Wrocław and discover it then. We were talking a lot about different ethnic groups. And I have to add one more. Look at the space on this side of the square. Here you can see a lot of trees. Then there is a moat, because here there was official border of the city till 1807. That year, Hieronymus Bonaparte arrived to Wrocław with his army, and as a result of his order, the walls of the city were destroyed, and now we have a beautiful promenade all around the old town of Wrocław. From this square, called first of all Exercise Square, because from the last wing you cannot see now, but the king was standing here and was watching his army parading or exercising. This square became the Liberty Square as the first parade in 1945 in Polish Wrocław took place right in here. And at the end, maybe a little bit of the stories of a different kind. As the square unites a lot of elements connected with culture, we have to mention the Opera House of Wrocław, 16th in the global ranking, so quite a good one. And just next to the Opera House, there is a former monastery space and nowadays building of a hotel, Monopole Hotel, created at the end of the 19th century and became a place of enormous luxury. So not surprisingly, a lot of celebrities and important people of the past were coming here. Among them, in 1938, there was Hitler, who came to Breslau to meet his people. And in order to enable him speaking to the people, not only from the Centennial Hall when there was the official gathering, but also from the hotel, a special balcony above the entrance was created just for the purpose of one speech. Many years later, on the same balcony stood a boy who in 1938 was here in the crowd of people, looking at that man, wondering why everybody is cherishing him so much, as he was raising terror of his own family. This man was Professor Abraham Asher, who managed to escape from the hands of the Nazi Germany and made his career in the United States. And one day he visited the city of Wrocław and stood on the same balcony as Hitler used to stand in order to speak in a spirit of a completely different reality. This hotel witnessed also some matches of a completely different kind. Rumor has it that it's a place where two celebrities, and I would say star of post-war history, met. That was German and American actress and singer Marlene Dietrich, and Polish, one of the greatest actors of that time, Zbigniew Cybulski. That happened in 1966. She came to Wrocław to give a concert, and he was making one of his movies. After a concert which gathered 10,000 people, she came to the hotel to relax a little bit in a bar. And there she was approached by a much younger boy with not a bunch of flowers, not a question to give him her autograph, but with a bottle of vodka in order to drink together. She knew who he was, as we could have discovered it from her diaries, where she wrote that Zbigniew Cybulski was the man she admired in every single movie she saw, because, as she was writing, he's the only actor she had ever seen who was able to play without using his eyes. They started to drink. But the story didn't end with drinking. Then they went upstairs and passed the night in one of the hotel apartments. The following day, Zbigniew Cybulski accompanied her to Wrocław's railway station because she had a ticket for a sleeping compartment in order to go to Warsaw. She joined her even on the train. But then a ticket collector simply kicked him out because he didn't imagine, though he was very famous, the actor traveling without a valid ticket. So in the last moment, because the train had already moved, Zbigniew Cybulski jumped off the train. Jumping on and off the train was a kind of his habit, which brought in fact his life to end. Next year he died on the same Wrocław railway station, trying to leave the train on the move. Ladies and gentlemen, very short walk, very small approach to the city of Wrocław. But I hope this little meeting, this little virtual walk, will show you that the city has really a lot to offer. And not only from the point of view of the history, contemporary city, it's a city of life, of energy, showing you, in fact, everything that had happened here and everything that is created nowadays. In 2018, Wrocław was chosen as the best European destination. And I think it wasn't without a reason. I hope I managed to convince you a little bit, at least, to get interested in the city of Wrocław. We are looking forward to meeting you here. So I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today, and let's hope see you soon to Wrocław. Thank you very much. Bye.